Hi, this is Mike, your instructor. I thought I'd do this quick screencast just to give you a sense of what I'm looking for in arguments. And this is an interesting assignment you have, because basically what you're supposed to do is take a position you disagree with and argue for that position. And why would we assign something like this? Doesn't it seem a bit cruel? Well, possibly, but that's not the reason. The real reason we're assigning this is, first of all, this is a critical thinking class. So part of what you want to do as a critical thinker is to be able to see things from different perspectives. And the challenge, of course, is to see something from a perspective that you disagree with. The second reason for this is when you're conducting an argument yourself, the more you can sympathetically understand what the other side has to say, the better you are able to argue against that position. So there's an interesting point here that understanding your opponent's argument is going to make your argument even stronger. And one of the things that I want to point out here is you want to avoid something called the straw man fallacy. What the straw man fallacy does is it takes an argument, it distorts the argument, and attacks that distortion. So a lot of times I think we'll take arguments that we disagree with and we'll simplify them or oversimplify them and then attack that oversimplification. And so this is a way of forcing ourselves to really try and flesh out an argument that we disagree with. And again, in the longer run, our own argumentation becomes stronger, because if we can show a neutral party that we understand the other side, we're going to be that much more convincing. So that's why we're doing this. Now let me give you some general criteria that I look for in an argument. First of all, it's a good idea to start out with an introduction. Better to start with an introduction than a conclusion, I know. And make sure that in that introduction, at some level, you have a thesis. A thesis is basically this a one-sentence or so statement about what you're going to argue. And it should include three things. First, the subject, the issue you are discussing. Obviously, that would just be I'm trying to think of something innocuous to use an example. The designated hitter rule. Okay, I actually, despite being an American League fan, oppose the designated hitter rule. And for those of you who are not baseball fans, the designated hitter rule is just a rule that the American League has that the National League doesn't, that a player can bat for the pitcher so that the pitcher does not have to bat. So the subject of my paper would be the designated hitter rule. The significance is the position I'm taking. So I oppose the designated hitter rule. So in my thesis I would have to say I oppose the designated hitter rule. So I can't just say this paper is about the designated hitter rule, but I have to say in this paper I'm going to oppose the designated hitter rule, or something to that effect, that the designated hitter rule is a bad idea. Finally, a really strong thesis is going to give reasons. So I might have three reasons for opposing the designated hitter rule. One, it takes some strategy out of the game. Two, it doesn't allow for players who are more well-rounded to be recognized. And three, it's a violation of hallowed baseball tradition. Now again, some of these may not be particularly great arguments, but they would be reasons, right? And so basically, a thesis statement would be something along the line of the designated hitter rule is something that should be abolished because it's a violation of baseball tradition, because it doesn't allow for well-rounded players, and because it changes the strategy. Okay, those three reasons. And obviously, when I make up ideas on the fly, it would be nice to, polish it up a little bit. Okay, so those are the things you want to make sure that you put in your thesis, and make sure that the issue is sufficiently refined. Okay, so try not to take an issue that's so broad that it's difficult to talk about in a say 4 to 6 page paper. The thesis can be anywhere, but it's generally best to have it in the introduction. It's a good idea to let your reader know what you're going to argue before you argue it. There are other ways of doing thesis statements, and it can be a little bit risky because it can lead to confusion. One is what's called the delayed thesis. Sometimes people like to write the paper and at the end say, and for these reasons, this is why, blah, blah, blah. So they wait until the end to say what the thesis is. The third way is something called an implied thesis, where the thesis isn't actually stated, but the reader can pick it up by reading the paper. The problem with that is you have to be very aware of your reader, and you have to basically assume that they can pick up your meaning. Usually, when I look at a paper, I look to see if it has a point or a thesis, and I'll ask the person, where is this thesis? And so it's a good idea to put the thesis in your paper. Now, if you as a writer decide, I don't want to put the thesis, I want to do a delayed thesis, or I want to do an implied thesis, just let me know so that I can look out for it, so I can have a sense of what your strategy is. But I'm spending so much time on thesis because once you have a thesis in place, the paper is much easier to write. Now, second, as we continue, the next thing that you want is you want a discussion of the opposing view. Now, you're writing a view that you oppose, so in a sense, you're discussing the weaknesses of the view that you support. All right? And so you should be able to state the case, the other case, and identify flaws in that case to the point that someone who's reading it will be able to say, yeah, I understand what these flaws are. And so first of all, show that you understand that point of view. Make sure you cover the major points of the opposing argument, and make sure that your attacks on the opposing argument are logically justifiable. Okay, so again, show that you understand the opposite point of view, show that you got the main points of the opposite point of view, and then make sure that your attacks are logical. Once you've basically said, you know, here's the issue with the opposing point, and in some cases you might be arguing for a midpoint between two extremes, so you would talk about more than one opposing point. Then you want to state what your argument is. Okay, state the case for your position. Provide whatever data or argumentation you need to support your points. And again, you don't have to have 3 points, as I pointed out in the thesis, but the reason I do this is then it organizes your argument, right? You're going to argue point 1, point 2, point 3, so support those 3 points. So make sure it's organized, that all the points are very clear, that they're coherent, that the supporting arguments and evidence are logically sound, and then finally that you're taking care of the strongest points possible in stating your argument. All right. Now, if you do these 2 things, you're going to have a good paper. But to have a truly great paper, I'm going to add one more thing, which is to anticipate the kinds of attacks that someone might make against your position. So what you want to do here is, first of all, this might require research. How have people attacked your position in the past? Maybe do role-playing. This is where your comments to each other online are really helpful. And then state possible reasons that people might disagree with your position, and then defend your position against such attacks. Now, there are 2 ways of doing this. One is to show that the attack is flawed. Okay? So, for example, one attack might be that against my thesis about the designated hitter rule might be that, well, tradition is not a good enough reason to not change things because the world is progressing and everything needs to progress with it. And I could say, well, that attack is not particularly relevant to baseball because baseball itself is a tradition and it holds America together, etc., etc. Another way to do it, instead of just showing that the attack is wrong, is to simply say, you know what, the attack is correct, but my point is still stronger than my opponent's point. So if somebody says, well, you know, the designated hitter rule, getting rid of the designated hitter rule is bad because pitchers are notoriously bad batters, and it's not fun to watch bad batters up at the plate. I could say, yeah, that's true. It isn't fun to watch batters at the plate, but it's better to watch bad batters at the plate than it is to have a system where just somebody can bat without even having to play another position or something like that. So I'm acknowledging the point, and I'm saying, yeah, there's a point to that, but it's just not as significant as the people arguing it want to make it. Okay? Again, when we look at the rebuttal, does the rebuttal that someone might make to your argument, or I'm sorry, the rebuttal of an attack someone else might make to your argument, does it show an understanding of the attack? are the major attacks covered? And I would say for a paper of this type, if you can show one major attack your opponents might make, you're in good shape. And then again, do you cover that attack well? Do you argue against that attack well? All right. So, and then finally a conclusion. Make sure that your argument is clear. Go back to your thesis, and I said use one of the strategies that discussed in class. Obviously, I didn't discuss any strategies in this class, but maybe summarize your point, end with a question, something like that to kind of tie everything up. All right. So again, you're arguing against a position that you agree with. So for the opposite side, of course, you're going to argue your side. The side that you tend to agree with. You're going to argue against the side that you tend to agree with, and then you're going to show why the side that you disagree with is actually stronger. Then, this part should be easy. You'll take an attack that you might make on that position and show why that attack doesn't work. So essentially what you're doing is you're pretending that you're arguing for the position that you oppose. All right? I know it sounds complicated. It's complicated in my mind even as I'm saying this, but I hope that going over this a little bit is helpful to you. If you have any questions, please post them or email them. All right? And good luck with these papers.